My defender is Bafodé Diakité, the 20-year-old French centre-back who plays in the second tier of French football for Toulouse. Um, he's a really interesting player, somebody who I've been watching for a little while. Obviously, Toulouse were relegated last term. They're looking likely to be in the promotion charge this season. I think I'm right in saying that they're currently, I think, third in the table, although Clermont-Foot have got a game in hand on them just above them, so that the gap between third and second might stretch a little bit. Toulouse themselves are a little bit interesting because they've just been bought over. Well, not just this season, they've been bought over by the Red Bird Football Group, which has Damien Comoli as the president of football and president or head of football operations at the group. So there's a little bit of investment at the club, and Toulouse are a club who are really well known for great youth development. They always seem to have one or two players popping around the first team that have come through their youth system, and these players will go on to have good careers elsewhere, or they'll develop into really important first team players for the club. If I had to put my money on it, I would say that Diakité will be somebody who will move on somewhere else because he's got he's got a profile. Not just because, I mean, you talk about French centre backs at the moment, and they seem to be all the vogue. If you look at the under-21 squad that the French have got at this European Championship, their defensive options are staggering. And Diakité is somebody who may have to wait his turn from an international perspective a little bit, but that doesn't diminish his quality. He's not undersized. I think he's just about 6'1", but he's got quite a powerful build. He's one of these modern defenders that can play as part of a back three, or he can play as one of a back four. He's really comfortable in possession of the ball, which is obviously what everybody's looking for at the moment. And interestingly for Toulouse, he quite often plays on the left-hand side despite being right-footed. So he is comfortable when he has to make challenges or play the ball on his left-hand side, as well as being able to play the ball on the right. He's capable of stepping into midfield in possession and finding those line-breaking passes. I mean, I'll be honest, when I scout centre halves, that's always something that I like to see. I like to see centre backs who are willing to take chances and play that line breaking pass that adds parking value, to use the advanced stat that's been coined by the German company. But what's really important, I think, is that he can also defend. There's been a couple of times, if you watch clips of him play or you go back and watch his games from last season, there's been a couple of times where he's made really important challenges in the defensive phase. And the way he celebrates when he makes a great clearance, it's like he scored a goal. And that's something that you really want to see from a young defender, because you want a defender who, yes, he can play on the ball, but you want them to love defending, because that's their job 70% of the time, unless you're playing in a really ridiculously possession orientated team in a Manchester City where for the most part they're using the build up phase and progression. But for the most part, you're going to have defenders wanting to defend, and Diakité gives you that. He's really powerful, quick, intelligent footballer, and I think that he is primed for a move this summer at the age of 20. I think that it's quite likely, especially if Toulouse end up not going up, I don't think there's any chance they can hold on to him.
Yeah, that title race, or rather the promotion race in Ligue 2 is really hotting up at the moment. And there's a player that is in amongst it, that I've selected as well. But just on Diakité, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned obviously that he's a right footer in a back three, but can also play on the left, because that's one of the things that I noticed as well. Because typically he'll be on the right hand side of that back three, but on other occasions, you could see him popping up on the left hand side, and I thought, well, it's good that you can have that versatility. Often, young players actually become victims of their own versatility sometimes. But I think that is especially in his position. It's not as though he's playing left wing and right wing and central midfield. It's like he's essentially playing the same position but on both sides. So I quite like that versatility, because if there's an injury to the left-sided centre half or wherever he goes, he can be that man to step in on either side of the defence. In terms of him typically playing in this back three, do you think there's anything about his game that perhaps would be exposed a little bit if he was playing in a back four with a sort of a two-man central defence partnership, or is he as we were saying, versatile enough to play as in a back three, but also a back two in terms of central defensive partnerships.
I think that from a tactical perspective, sometimes you've got to understand with a young player when they play as a back three, especially Diakité. I've already touched upon the fact he's quite comfortable on the ball and he doesn't mind stepping into midfield and carrying the ball into the opposition half and trying to trigger the opposition to press him before he passes the ball on. I think in a back three, you can do that comfortably because you have good cover. I mean, the other two centre halves are there; they're able to slide over and provide good defensive cover and a good base to the attack like that. But I think when you play as part of a back four, it becomes more difficult unless the team that you're playing in are very well coached. I mean, you see the likes of Virgil van Dijk do it, you see the likes of John Stones do it, you see like Aymeric Laporte do it, all these people who play at the very, very top level. But when they make those movements, the rest of the team understand how they need to provide balance and cover behind. So you might see the six slide across, you might see the fullback drop deeper because the centre half's pressed up. I think that as he makes the next move, it's going to become very evident if that's something that he's going to continue to do, because it's likely his next move will be to a team at a higher level with a higher level of competition where opposition players, if Diakité steps into midfield and loses the ball, or if his pass is loose and the opposition regain possession in transition, I think then it becomes really interesting because you start to see whether he can adjust his game to no longer make those mistakes, because they will take advantage of any mistakes that he makes.
Diakité is one who had a pretty hard start to life as a professional footballer in terms of being in that Toulouse defence last season,
Yeah.
that being 2019-20, that just lost so many consecutive games in Liga that season. That was very much a year in which it was a very inexperienced defence. It was hemorrhaging goals, and before the season was curtailed due to COVID, the team were on a one way ticket to Ligue 2. It's obviously good to see that they've bounced back. They're in within the race to come back up. But in terms of on a personal level, Diakité is obviously he's stuck around. He hasn't sort of jumped ship at all. He's now sort of an integral part of this promotion challenging squad. Are there any improvements that you've seen in his game from sort of season 1 to season 2? And would you say that, because often when you drop down a division, obviously the quality isn't the same. Would you say that any of these improvements that you've seen are to do with the level of quality that he's facing, or rather that he's just getting more exposure, more first team experience?
I think you could argue it's a little bit of everything, but for a young player to suffer a relegation in his first season in the first team is difficult, especially a young player who played quite a few minutes in that relegation season, although it was interrupted by COVID. I think that he was still somebody who the hierarchy at Toulouse and the coaching staff trusted. Obviously, they haven't gone out and tried to replace him, but at the same time, he hasn't crumbled under that pressure. I think that what we've seen, obviously, because last season was a completely different picture for him. They were so poor in Ligue 1 last season, which isn't normal. Toulouse are normally a fairly consistent mid-table kind of League One outfit who do well in terms of player sales and player trading, but they were so poor from a defensive perspective that the pictures that he was seeing on the pitch last season are completely different to what he's seeing this season. Toulouse didn't have possession; they didn't have the ball to look for these moments when defenders could step forward or defenders could play the diagonal pass to access space on the far side of the pitch. He was just defending for his life for the vast majority of last season because they were under pressure almost constantly within matches. There were times where they would have possession, obviously, but then it becomes really difficult for a young player because your team are struggling, your team are behind, your team are losing the possession battle. So the moments when you do get the ball, being able to have the calmness to make the right choice and make the correct progressive pass becomes really difficult. I think this season, because yes, the quality in terms of their opponents is less, they perhaps got a little bit more time in terms of preparation, although the fixture list is still congested in League 2, sorry. I think that you're starting to see a different picture because this is a player who is more comfortable, perhaps, with a little bit more time in the ball when he's able to make correct choices, and he's not just purely seen as a defensive player. And that might be something that needs to be mirrored in his next move. He might need to move to a club who are willing to play a little bit more possession orientated instead of a club who are looking to just sit in a low block and then play quick transition football.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the considerations that I think any player who is sort of performing at the top level of a second division is going to need to take into account when the inevitable transfer speculation comes around from teams in the top flight.